I never imagined that tonight would be the night everything changed. One moment I was parked outside Romano's, scrolling through my phone between rides, and the next, my car's back door flew open with such force that I nearly dropped my coffee. A man practically threw himself into my back seat, breathing hard, his hair disheveled and his expensive suit jacket askew. "Drive. Now. Please just drive," he gasped. And when I looked up into the rearview mirror, I saw something I wasn't expecting. Genuine panic mixed with embarrassment in his eyes. My heart started racing as I instinctively checked the restaurant entrance behind us. A tall woman in a designer dress stood there, perfectly styled from head to toe, scanning the street with her phone pressed to her ear. Her body language screamed frustration and anger. Something told me she was exactly who this guy was running from. "Sir, are you okay? Should I be worried right now?" I asked, my hand hovering over the gear shift, unsure whether to help or kick him out. He slumped back against the seat, finally catching his breath, and let out this exhausted laugh that somehow made the whole situation feel less threatening. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just escaping the worst blind date of my life. My family set it up and I couldn't take another minute of it." I couldn't help but smile at the honesty in his voice. There was something refreshing about a guy who'd literally flee from a bad date rather than suffer through it politely. "Well, this is definitely a first for me. Usually people use my car to get somewhere, not to escape from something." As I pulled into traffic, putting distance between us and the restaurant, I got my first real look at him through the mirror. The suit wasn't just expensive, it was custom tailored, probably worth more than I made in 3 months. His watch caught the streetlight, and I recognized it immediately as a Rolex. Everything about him screamed money and status, from his perfectly styled dark hair to the subtle designer cologne that filled my car. "Wait, let me guess," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "You're some kind of executive? Maybe a CEO hiding from your responsibilities?" He met my eyes in the mirror, and for a second I saw him hesitate. Then he gave me this half smile that made my stomach do a weird flip. Something like that. "I'm Colton, by the way. What's your name?" "Scott," I replied. And suddenly I was very aware of how ordinary my name sounded compared to everything else about this situation. "Nice to meet you, I guess. Even if the circumstances are pretty unusual." Colton shifted in his seat and I watched as he finally relaxed his shoulders, loosening his tie like he'd been suffocating in it. "Trust me, Scott, you have no idea how good it feels to just breathe right now. That date was a nightmare. She spent the entire dinner talking about her family's portfolio and which country club we should join after the wedding." "Wedding? Wasn't this your first date?" I asked. Apparently in her mind, we were already planning our future. She had our next 5 years mapped out before the appetizers arrived. Colton said, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "My mother set this up. She thinks if I don't settle down immediately, I'll die alone and miserable. But I can't do something that fake. I can't pretend to be interested in someone when there's absolutely no connection." There was something vulnerable in the way he said it that caught me off guard. This wasn't just some rich guy complaining about his dating problems. He sounded genuinely exhausted, like he'd been fighting this battle for a long time. "So where should I take you?" I asked, glancing at the GPS. "I'm guessing you have a penthouse somewhere downtown? Or maybe a secret hideout for when you need to escape your life." Colton leaned forward slightly, and I could feel his presence in a way that made me hyper-aware of every movement. "Honestly, I don't want this ride to end yet. Can we just drive for a while? No destination. Just away from all of that." My heart skipped in a way I hadn't felt in years. There was something about the way he asked, not demanding, not entitled, just honest and almost hopeful, that made it impossible to say no. "Sure," I heard myself saying. "I've got nowhere else to be tonight." We drove through the city as the lights blurred past, and I found myself stealing glances at him in the mirror. Without the tension from before, I could see he was younger than I initially thought. Probably only a few years older than me. Maybe 30 at most. The corporate armor was starting to crack, revealing someone who looked tired but relieved. "Can I ask you something?" Colton said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. "Do you like what you do, driving people around the city?" The question surprised me, because most passengers never bothered to ask personal things. It's not my dream job or anything, but it pays the bills while I figure out what I actually want to do with my life. Plus, I get to meet interesting people sometimes. Like executives running from blind dates. He laughed. A real laugh this time. Not the polite chuckle from before. I envy that freedom. Honestly. The not knowing, the possibility that you can still become anything. My entire life has been planned since I was born. Private schools, specific university, take over the family company. There was never a moment to ask what I wanted. That sounds exhausting, I admitted. But you're the CEO now, right? Can't you make your own choices? You'd think so, Colton said quietly. But family expectations are harder to escape than you'd imagine. Every decision gets scrutinized. Every relationship is evaluated based on how it looks to the board, to investors, to society. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing a character in someone else's story. I took a chance and made eye contact with him in the mirror. Well, right now, in this car, you don't have to be anything except whoever you want to be. No audience. No expectations. Just Colton. The way he looked at me then made something shift in the air between us. It was like I'd said exactly what he needed to hear, and suddenly we weren't just a driver and passenger anymore. We were two people having a real moment. Thank you for that, he said softly. I know this is weird, me hijacking your car and unloading my problems on you. But this feels more real than anything I've experienced in months. Maybe years. It's not weird, I assured him, though my racing heart suggested otherwise. Sometimes the best conversations happen with strangers. No history, no judgment, just honesty. As I drove through the illuminated streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that this random encounter was the beginning of something I couldn't name yet. Something that would matter more than I could possibly understand in this moment. We'd been driving for almost 30 minutes when Colton asked if we could stop somewhere. Not home, he clarified. Anywhere but home. There was a weight in his voice that suggested he was running from more than just a bad date. He was avoiding whatever waited for him in his real life. There's a diner near here that's open all night, I suggested. Best coffee in the city, or so they claim. Want to check it out? That sounds perfect, Colton said. And I could hear the relief in his acceptance. The Starlight Diner was nearly empty when we arrived. Just a couple of truck drivers at the far end, and a tired waitress refilling coffee pots. The fluorescent lights gave everything a slightly surreal quality, like we'd stepped into a movie set from the 70s. Colton and I slid into a booth by the window, and I watched as he took in the cracked vinyl seats and laminated menus with what looked like genuine appreciation. This is great, he said, and I could tell he meant it. When was the last time I sat in a place like this without worrying about who might see me or what photos might end up online? The waitress appeared with 2 mugs and a steaming pot. Coffee? She asked. Already pouring before we answered. Please, we said in unison, then laughed at the synchronization. Once she'd left, I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and studied Colton more carefully now that we were face to face. Under the harsh diner lights, I could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension he carried in his shoulders even when he was trying to relax. But there was also something captivating about him. The way he held himself with unconscious confidence, the intelligence in his expression, the small scar above his left eyebrow that made him look less polished and more human. So tell me the truth, I started, adding sugar to my coffee. Was tonight really about the blind date, or is there something bigger you're avoiding? Colton wrapped both hands around his mug, staring into the dark liquid like it might have answers. Both, I guess. The date was awful, but it's also everything the date represents. My family has been pushing me toward this kind of life for years. Marry the right person, produce heirs, maintain the image. It doesn't matter if I'm happy or fulfilled. What matters is keeping up appearances. That's not really living though, is it? I said carefully. That's just existing in a role someone else wrote for you. Exactly. Colton looked up, and his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. But how do you break free from expectations when they're tied to everything? Your career, your family relationships, your entire identity. Walking away means losing so much. I thought about my own life. Small apartment, uncertain future. Freedom to make my own mistakes. Maybe what you'd lose isn't as valuable as what you'd gain. The ability to make genuine choices, to build something that's actually yours, not a continuation of someone else's legacy. You make it sound so simple, Colton said. But he was smiling now, a sad but genuine expression. Most people in my life would tell me I'm being selfish or immature for even thinking about walking away. that I have obligations and responsibilities. Most people in your life probably have something to gain from keeping you in that box. I pointed out, I'm just a guy who drives strangers around. I've got no agenda except maybe hoping you leave a good tip. That made him laugh outright. The sound surprising both of us in the quiet diner. God, when was the last time someone talked to me like a normal person? No flattery, no hidden motives, just direct honesty. Is that really so rare in your world? I asked. You have no idea, Colton leaned back, his shoulders finally relaxing. Everyone wants something. A business deal, a connection, an introduction to someone important. Even my friends from college treat me differently now. Like I'm a resource to be managed rather than a person to know. Our waitress returned to refill our cups, and we both went quiet until she left again. The silence between us felt comfortable rather than awkward. Like we'd known each other longer than just a couple of hours. Can I ask you something personal? Colton said eventually, his voice lower now. After everything you've told me tonight, go ahead. Do you believe in connection? Like real, unexpected connection between people? The kind that doesn't make logical sense but feels undeniable anyway? My heart started pounding because I knew exactly what he was really asking. I think I do. I think sometimes you meet someone and there's just this recognition, like you've been waiting to find them without knowing you were looking. That's what this feels like, Colton admitted, his eyes never leaving mine. Sitting here with you, I know we just met. I know it sounds crazy to feel this way about someone whose last name I don't even know. But right now, in this diner at midnight, I feel more like myself than I have in years. I should have been skeptical. I should have protected myself from getting swept up in what was probably just a temporary connection born from his need to escape reality. But instead I found myself saying, I feel it too, like we're in this bubble outside of normal time and rules. Colton reached across the table slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. When I didn't move, he placed his hand over mine, and the warmth of the contact sent electricity up my arm. That if this doesn't have to be just one night? What if we could see where this goes? You're talking about bringing this back into the real world, I said, though I didn't pull my hand away. Where you're a CEO and I'm a driver. Where our lives are completely different. Screw the differences, Colton said with sudden fierceness. I'm so tired of living by other people's rules about what makes sense or what's appropriate. For once I want to choose something just because it feels right, because it makes me happy. The vulnerability in his confession was staggering. This man who commanded boardrooms and made decisions worth millions was asking me, just me, for permission to explore something as simple and complicated as human connection. Okay? I whispered. Let's see where this goes. We stayed in that diner until the sky started lightening, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about the pressure of inheriting a company he never asked for. I told him about the dreams I'd put on hold to pay rent. We laughed about terrible movies we loved, and argued about whether breakfast food was superior to all other food. We existed in that space between night and morning, where nothing felt impossible. When we finally stood to leave, Colton pulled out his business card and handed it to me. His fingers lingered against mine for just a moment longer than necessary. Call me, he said. Please. I need to know this wasn't just a beautiful dream I'll wake up from. I tucked the card carefully into my wallet. It wasn't a dream. And I'll call you. I promise. The next day felt like walking through fog. I went through my usual routine, showering, making terrible instant coffee, checking my phone for ride requests. But everything felt distant and unreal. My mind kept returning to Colton. The way he'd looked at me across that diner table, the warmth of his hand over mine. The hope in his voice when he'd asked me to call. But in the harsh light of day, doubts crept in. What was I thinking? He was Colton right. I'd finally looked him up after getting home, and holy hell, the man was featured in Forbes. He ran a multi-million-dollar tech company. His family was practically royalty in business circles. Meanwhile, I was Scott Morrison, a guy who lived paycheck to paycheck and whose biggest achievement this year was finally paying off my credit card debt. We existed in completely different stratospheres. Last night had been an escape for him, a momentary rebellion against his structured life. But reality always reasserted itself. He'd go back to his world of penthouses and board meetings, and I'd go back to mine of small apartments and scrambling for extra rides to cover rent. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself not to call him. It would be easier to preserve last night as a perfect memory rather than risk the inevitable disappointment when he realized what a mistake he'd made. Better to let it fade naturally than force something that couldn't work. I was making dinner, heating up leftover pizza when my phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number. Probably spam. But something made me check anyway. The message stopped my heart. Scott, are you free right now? My hands actually shook as I stared at those words. He'd texted me. Colton had actually reached out first. This wasn't me desperately clinging to something fleeting. He wanted to see me again. I had to read it 3 times before my brain accepted it was real. Then I stood there, frozen, trying to figure out how to respond. Should I play it cool? Pretend I wasn't desperately hoping to hear from him? Or should I just be honest? Honesty had worked last night. Yeah, I'm free. What's going on? The 3 dots indicating he was typing appeared immediately, disappeared, then appeared again. Whatever he wanted to say, he was choosing his words carefully. I need to see you. Can you meet me somewhere? Please? The please got me. There was something vulnerable about it, like he wasn't sure I'd say yes. Like he was just as nervous about this as I was. Send me the address. 10 minutes later, I was in my car, heading toward an upscale rooftop bar in the financial district. The kind of place where they probably charged $20 for a beer and judged you for ordering domestic. I almost turned around twice, anxiety churning in my stomach. What would we even talk about? Last night had been fueled by spontaneity and escape. What happened when we tried to replicate that magic intentionally? The elevator to the rooftop seemed to take forever. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into a space that was everything I'd imagined. Dim lighting, expensive furniture, a view of the city that probably cost extra. Only a handful of people were scattered around, speaking in low voices over craft cocktails. And there, at a corner table away from everyone else, was Colton. But not the Colton from last night. This version had traded his suit for dark jeans and a fitted charcoal sweater. His hair was less styled, falling slightly across his forehead. He looked younger somehow, more approachable. When he saw me, he stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his glass. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. I wasn't sure you would. I kept thinking maybe last night was just a weird blip for you, or that in late you'd realize how insane this all is. I walked over to him, hyper-aware of how out of place I looked in my worn jeans and basic jacket. I almost didn't. Spent most of the day convincing myself this was a terrible idea. But you're here, Colton said, gesturing for me to sit across from him. That has to mean something, right? I settled into the chair, trying not to think about how much everything in this place probably cost. I couldn't stop thinking about you. About last night. Even when I tried to be logical about all the reasons this doesn't make sense. Logic is overrated, Colton said, but his hand was gripping his glass tightly. Look, I'm not good at this. At being vulnerable or honest about what I want. My whole life has been about maintaining control and meeting expectations. But yesterday when I ran into your car, it was the first time in forever that I just acted on instinct. And sitting in a diner talking until dawn? I prompted gently, was the most real I've felt in years. He finished. Scott, I can't explain this rationally. We barely know each other. We come from completely different worlds. Everything about this defies logic and common sense. But, I could hear there was a but coming. Colton leaned forward, his eyes intense and uncertain at the same time. But I haven't been able to think about anything else except seeing you again. You're in my head constantly. The way you listened without judgment. The way you saw me as just Colton, not as my title or my family name or my net worth. With you, I could just exist without all the performance. My throat went dry. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want last night to be a one-time thing. I want more of this. More of you. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I'm asking if you're willing to find out what this could become. Everything in me wanted to say yes immediately. But I forced myself to slow down. Colton, your life is complicated in ways I can't even imagine. Family pressure, business obligations, public image. Where would someone like me fit into all that? I don't know, he admitted. And honestly, that terrifies me. But what terrifies me more is going back to living the life I'm supposed to want instead of choosing something that actually makes me happy. You make me happy, Scott. This connection we have, it's worth fighting for. He reached across the table and took my hand. The same gesture from last night, but somehow weighted with more meaning now. This wasn't just a moment of escape anymore. This was a choice. A begin. I don't expect you to have all the answers right now, Colton continued. I just need to know if you feel this too. If there's enough here to at least try. I looked at our joined hands, then up at his face. This man who had everything material but was asking me for something money couldn't buy. Something simple and profound, genuine connection. I feel it, I said finally. Whatever this is, I feel it too. And yeah, I want to see where it goes. The smile that broke across Colton's face was worth every risk, every doubt, every complication that might come. In that moment, nothing else mattered except the two of us, choosing each other against all logic. Thank you, he whispered, squeezing my hand. Thank you for taking this chance. The next few weeks with Colton felt like living in a beautiful bubble that I knew would eventually burst. We fell into a pattern of stolen moments. Late-night drives through empty streets, quiet dinners in obscure restaurants, May morning coffee before the world woke up. But as the days passed, I started noticing things that nagged at the edges of my happiness. Colton was always looking over his shoulder. Not obviously, not in a way that most people would catch, but I saw it. In public spaces, his body language would shift subtly, shoulders tensing, eyes aims the room, an invisible wall going up between us and everyone else. We never went to popular restaurants. We never took photos together. When we walked down busy streets, he'd put distance between us, like we were just two strangers heading in the same direction. At first, I told myself it was just caution. He was a public figure after all. But as time went on, it started to feel less like protection and more like hiding. Like I was something he needed to keep secret. One evening, we were walking through Riverside Park. It was nearly empty, just a few joggers and dog walkers in the distance. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under our feet, and for the first time in days, Colton seemed truly relaxed. His hands were in his jacket pockets, his face turned toward the fading sunset, and I could see him wrestling with something. My family situation is more complicated than I've let on, he finally said, breaking the comfortable silence we'd been walking in. They're not just traditional, they're aggressively controlling about every aspect of my life, especially who I'm involved with romantically. I'd known this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud still sent a chill through me. What do you mean by controlling? Colton stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression troubled. My father built right technologies from nothing. It's his entire identity, his legacy. He expects me to run it exactly as he did. Same philosophy, same business practices, same public image. Any deviation is seen as betrayal. He paused, looking down at the path. And my mother has very specific ideas about who would be an appropriate partner for me. Someone from the right background, the right social circle, someone who enhances the family image. The implication hung in the air between us like a physical thing. Someone who fits their standards, I said quietly. And I'm guessing a ride-share driver doesn't make the cut. It's not about you, Scott. It's about their narrow, outdated view of what success looks like. Colton reached out and grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. They care about appearances, about maintaining a certain status. Your honesty, your genuine nature, the way you've built your life on your own terms. None of that matters to them because it doesn't fit their definition of suitable. My chest tightened painfully. This wasn't just about meeting disapproving parents. This was about fundamental incompatibility between who I was and what his family demanded. So what does that mean for us? Are we just killing time until reality catches up? No, Colton said fiercely, his grip on my shoulders tightening. What I have with you is the most authentic thing in my life right now. But I won't lie to you. There's going to be a fight. My family won't accept this easily. There will be ultimatums, threats, emotional manipulation. They'll try to convince me I'm throwing my life away. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back, determined to stay strong. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family or your company. That's too much to ask of anyone. You're not asking, Colton said. And now his hands moved to cup my face, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. I'm choosing. I've spent my entire life letting them dictate my decisions, always putting their expectations above my own happiness. But you've shown me what it feels like to be seen for who I really am, not what I represent. I can't go back to that empty existence. Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was different from our previous kisses, not tentative or exploratory, but definitive. A statement. Right there in the open park, under the streetlights that were just beginning to flicker on, Colton was claiming this relationship publicly for the first time. When we pulled apart, I was breathless. That was risky. Anyone could have seen us. Good, Colton said, though I could see the fear in his eyes too. I'm tired of hiding what matters to me. Let them see. Let the world know. We stood there in the growing darkness, and I realized that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a romance anymore. It was a declaration of war against everything Colton had been raised to value. And as much as his conviction moved me, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to face something neither of us was fully prepared for. The walk back to the car was quieter, both of us lost in thought. Colton held my hand the entire way, his grip almost desperate, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. When we reached my car, he pulled me close one more time. I need you to trust me, he said against my hair. This is going to get messy and painful, and there will be moments when you'll doubt whether I'm worth all this trouble. But I'm asking you to hold on, to believe that what we have is worth fighting for. I do believe that, I whispered back. I'm just scared of what it's going to cost you. Let me worry about the cost, Colton said. You just worry about not giving up on me. As I drove home that night, my mind was racing. I'd entered this relationship thinking it was just an unexpected connection, a beautiful surprise in my ordinary life. But now I understood it was so much bigger than that. Colton wasn't just choosing to date me. He was choosing to rebuild his entire life around different values, different priorities, and I was the catalyst for that transformation. The weight of that responsibility was terrifying. What if he sacrificed everything and then regretted it? What if his family found ways to make his life impossible? What if I wasn't strong enough to weather the storm that was coming? But then I remembered the way he'd kissed me in that park, claiming us publicly despite his fear. I remembered the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about wanting to live authentically, and I knew that whatever was coming, we'd face it together. The battle lines had been drawn. Colton's family represented the old world. Tradition, obligation, appearance over substance. We represented something different. Choice, authenticity, love over convenience. And in the coming days, we'd find out which world would win. I just hoped we'd both survive the war intact. For about 2 weeks after that conversation in the park, things were relatively peaceful. We continued our secret meetings, though Colton seemed more determined to be less secretive. He'd reach for my hand in restaurants, kiss me goodbye in parking lots, text me openly during work hours. It felt like progress, like we were building something that could withstand scrutiny. Then everything imploded on a random Tuesday evening. I was at my apartment, and Colton had come over after work. We'd ordered Chinese food and were halfway through a terrible action movie when his phone started ringing. He glanced at the screen, declined the call, then turned his attention back to the movie. But then it rang again, and again. By the fourth call, the tension in his body was impossible to ignore. You should probably answer that, I said, pausing the movie. Colton stared at his phone like it was a bomb about to detonate. It's my ex-boyfriend, he said finally. Harlan. He's apparently back in the city. My stomach dropped. Your ex? You've never mentioned an ex before. Because he's been living in London for the past 3 years, Colton said, his voice tight. We dated in college and for a few years after. It ended badly. Lots of accusations, broken trust, ugly fights about where our lives were heading. But my family adored him. Still does apparently. He comes from old money, went to the right schools, knew how to play their game perfectly. Understanding dawned slowly and painfully. He's the suitable partner they wanted for you. Was. Past tense, Colton corrected. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. Whatever we had ended a long time ago, but the timing of his return can't be coincidence. My mother must have bade him, convinced him to come back and talk sense into me. The phone rang again. This time Colton answered, putting it on speaker. Harlan, what do you want? Such hostility, darling, a smooth, cultured voice replied. I'm in town for a few weeks and thought we should catch up. Your mother mentioned you've been going through something. I'd love to help if I can. I don't need help, Colton said flatly. And I'm seeing someone. There was a pause. Yes? She mentioned. Scott, isn't it? I'm actually at your building right now. Why don't you invite me up? I'd love to meet the person who's caused upheaval in the right family. Colton's face went pale. You're here? Now, lobby level. I won't take much of your time. Unless you're afraid to let me meet him. It was a challenge, deliberately calculated, and I could see Colton struggling with how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell him to send Harlan away, but another part knew that would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Fine, Colton said. Come up. The next 10 minutes were excruciating. Colton paced his living room like a caged animal while I sat frozen on the couch, trying to prepare myself for whatever was about to happen. When the knock finally came, Colton took a deep breath before opening the door. Harlan was everything I'd imagined and worse. Tall, impeccably dressed in what was obviously a designer suit, perfectly styled blonde hair and an air of effortless superiority that he wore like cologne. He looked at me with sharp blue eyes that assessed and dismissed me in seconds. So you're Scott, he said, extending a hand. Harlan Morrison. Pleasure to meet you. His handshake was firm to the point of aggressive. Likewise, I managed. Charming place you have, Colton, Harlan said, walking into the apartment uninvited. Though I remember you once said you'd never live anywhere without a proper view. Times change, I suppose. What do you want, Harlan? Colton asked, positioning himself between us. I want to understand what's happening here, Harlan said, settling into a chair like he owned it. Your parents are worried sick. Your father says you've been distracted at work, making uncharacteristic decisions. Your mother thinks you're having some sort of crisis. And now I see you've taken up with... He glanced at me. Well, someone decidedly outside your usual circle. Scott isn't a crisis, Colton said, his voice dangerous. He's the first real thing I've had in years. Real? Harlan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Colton, be honest with yourself. This is rebellion, not reality. You're pushing back against your family's expectations by choosing the most unsuitable person possible. It's textbook behavior. You don't know anything about us, I said, finding my voice despite wanting to disappear. Don't I? Harlan turned his full attention to me for the first time. Let me guess. You met under unusual circumstances. There was immediate chemistry. He opened up to you in ways he never has with anyone else. It felt fated, magical, like the universe brought you together. His words hit uncomfortably close to home, and he saw my reaction. That's Colton's pattern. I'm afraid. He romanticizes escape. I was his rebellion once too. The boyfriend his parents initially disapproved of until I proved myself worthy. But eventually reality intrudes, the demands of his position, the weight of family obligation, the fundamental incompatibility of your worlds. It always ends the same way. Get out, Colton said, his voice shaking with rage. Now, I'm trying to save you both from a painful inevitability, Harlan said, standing gracefully. Scott seems like a nice enough person. He doesn't deserve to be collateral damage in your identity crisis. And you, Colton, you're about to throw away everything your family has built over what? A few weeks of feeling understood? Those few weeks have been more meaningful than the years I wasted trying to be who everyone else wanted, Colton shot back. Harlan walked to the door, then paused. Your father is prepared to remove you from the company leadership if you continue down this path. Your mother is already rewriting the trust fund stipulations. Think carefully about whether this is worth losing everything. Colton, I'll be in town for 2 more weeks if you want to talk sense. After he left, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Colton stood with his back to me, shoulders rigid. I wanted to go to him, to offer comfort, but Harlan's words were echoing in my head. Was I just another rebellion? Another escape from expectations that would eventually lose its appeal? Scott, Colton said without turning around. Tell me you don't believe what he said. I don't know what to believe right now. I admitted. He seemed pretty confident about how this ends. Because he wants it to end that way. Colton turned to face me and I saw tears on his cheeks. He wants me back in the fold, compliant and controllable. And if he can make you doubt us, then he wins without having to compete. But what if he's right? I asked. What if we're just caught up in the excitement of defying expectations? What happens when that wears off? Colton crossed the room and took my hands. Then we find out together. But I won't let him poison what we have with his cynicism. He doesn't know us. He doesn't know what we've built here. I wanted to believe him, but as I looked into his desperate eyes, I couldn't shake the fear that Harlan had planted. We were about to face the full force of everything Colton's world could throw at us, and I wasn't sure we were strong enough to survive it. The week following Harlan's visit was the hardest of my life. Colton's phone never stopped, calls from his mother, messages from his father's assistant requesting meetings, texts from family friends offering advice. Harlan seemed to be everywhere Colton went, showing up at business lunches, appearing at charity events, always perfectly positioned to remind everyone of what a suitable couple they'd once made. I saw Colton less and less. Our conversations became rushed, stolen moments between his obligations. I could see him being pulled in multiple directions, the pressure mounting with each passing day, and the worst part was feeling helpless to do anything about it. On Friday night, just after 11, my phone buzzed with a text that made my heart stop. "I need you. Please come." Now, I didn't hesitate. 20 minutes later, I was at Colton's apartment, using the key he'd given me the week before. The place was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. I found him sitting on the floor of his living room, still in his work clothes but completely disheveled, shirt untucked, tie discarded somewhere, hair standing in multiple directions like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Colton." I approached carefully, kneeling beside him. He looked up, and I saw that he'd been crying. His eyes were red and swollen, his face blotchy. "My father called me into his office today," he said, his voice hoarse. "Gave me an ultimatum. Either I end things with you and publicly reconcile with Harlan, or I'm removed from all leadership positions. They've already drafted the paperwork. My inheritance will be restructured. I'll technically still own shares, but I'll have no voice in company decisions. Everything I've worked for just gone." I sat down beside him, our shoulders touching. "What did you say?" "I said I needed time to think about it," Colton admitted. "And then I came home and I've been sitting here for 3 hours trying to figure out how I got to this point. How did life become such a disaster?" "It's not a disaster," I said, though my heart was breaking. "It's complicated and it's painful, but it's not a disaster, isn't it?" Colton turned to me, grabbing my hands. "Scott, if I choose you, I lose everything else. My family, my position, my purpose. I'll have money from other investments. I'll survive financially. But the company is my identity. It's what I've been preparing for my entire life. And my family, despite everything, they're still my family. The thought of being cut off from them, of disappointing them this completely—" "Then don't choose me," I said, even though the words felt like swallowing glass. "Colton, I never wanted to be the reason you lost everything. If being with me cost you your entire life, then maybe Harlan was right. Maybe this is just rebellion that's gotten out of hand." "Don't say that," Colton said fiercely. "You're not just rebellion. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like I could be something other than a right heir. With you, I'm just Colton, flawed and uncertain and real." "But is that enough?" I asked, tears streaming down my face now. "Is being yourself worth giving up everything you've worked for? Because I'm not sure I could live with that guilt, knowing you sacrificed so much for me." Colton pulled me close, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "What if I told you that all those things I'd be giving up, they were never really mine to begin with? My position at the company comes with strings. My inheritance is contingent on obedience. Even my relationships have always been subject to approval. I've never actually been free, Scott. I've just been a well-decorated puppet, but cutting those strings means falling," I said into his shoulder, "and I'm terrified you'll regret it. That 6 months or a year from now, you'll wake up and realize what you gave up and you'll resent me for it." He pulled back to look at me, cupping my face in his hands. "The only thing I'd regret is spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Living safely in my gilded cage, always knowing I was too afraid to choose my own happiness." "What if your happiness changes?" I asked. "What if I'm not enough once the novelty wears off?" "Then we'll deal with it like any couple deals with change together. Honestly, with respect for what we built." Colton's thumbs wiped away my tears. "But I don't believe that's going to happen. What I feel for you isn't infatuation or rebellion. It's love, Scott. I'm in love with you. And that's not going to change because I lose a job title." My breath caught. He'd never said those words before. "You love me?" "Completely. Terrifyingly. Irrevocably." He pressed his forehead against mine. "And I know this is fast. And I know we're still figuring things out. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to choose you, Scott. I want to choose us. I just need to know that you won't give up when things get harder. I'm not going anywhere, I promised, though I was shaking. If you're really sure about this, if you can accept the consequences, then I'm with you. All the way. Colton kissed me then, and it tasted like salt from our tears and felt like a promise we were both making. When we finally pulled apart, he said, I'm calling my father tomorrow. I'm telling him I won't be manipulated into a relationship I don't want. I'm keeping my shares but stepping back from daily operations. And I'm prepared for whatever fallout comes from that decision. What about Harlan? I asked. Harlan can go back to London knowing he failed, Colton said with a bitter smile. He thought he could waltz back in and reclaim what he saw as his. But I'm not a possession to be claimed. I'm a person making my own choices, even if they're messy and complicated. That night we stayed up talking through every possible outcome, every fear, every hope. We made plans for how to handle his family's reaction, how to protect each other from the scrutiny that would inevitably come. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was practical and difficult and absolutely necessary. The next day, Colton followed through. He met with his father and calmly but firmly declined the ultimatum. He offered to transition out of his leadership role gradually to minimize disruption, but he wouldn't compromise on his personal life. His father's response was to expedite his removal and cut off all non-essential communication. When Colton called to tell me what happened, his voice was shaky but also lighter somehow. It's done. I'm officially a family disappointment. You're officially free, I corrected. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Together, he repeated, and I could hear him smiling. I really liked the sound of that. We had a long road ahead of us. Rebuilding his career identity, navigating his fractured family relationships, figuring out who Colton was outside of right technologies. But as I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt since Harlan had shown up. Hope, because Colton hadn't chosen me over his family. He'd chosen himself. He'd chosen authenticity over obligation, love over convenience, his own path over someone else's expectations. And I just happened to be lucky enough to walk that path with him. Whatever battles lay ahead, we'd already won the most important one. The fight to live honestly together.